FTX, our old friend Sam Bankman-Fried. Well, they just announced that they are going to pay everybody back who lost money. I think they've got 14.5 billion up to 16 billion to pay off the $11 billion of debt. And interestingly, those whose claims are less than 50 grand are going to get about 120% of their money back. They're actually going to make money by being ripped off. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm well, Michael. How are you?
Well, I'm good. Looks like you're out on a story again.
All done for the day, and yeah, wrapped and ready to go.
Okay, well, we're not getting a lot of new products being introduced these days, I notice, besides NVIDIA with its chips, but it's sort of quiet on the consumer product front, but there's other stuff we can talk about that is kind of interesting. The first one, let's get it out of the way. We actually had another bad news rally on the stock market. Unemployment numbers, people looking for jobs, it went up to 231,000, which is the highest since last August. And the market thought that was the greatest thing they've seen in a long time. And it extended it now has a 2024 best win streak. And you have to go back to the middle of last year to match it. So, I mean, the Wall Street's looking for the right kind of bad news to justify the Fed intervening and cutting rates.
Yeah, this is nothing new for Wall Street, and it's been a brutal trend for as long as I can remember. Wall Street loves efficiency, and whether it's a company, Meta really stands out for seeing its stock price go up after cutting so many tens of thousands of tech workers, or an entire economy saying we have the combination of both slow job growth, there is still growth, but slower than expected, and then unemployment claims going up all within about a week of each other. And Wall Street really likes that combination, partly because it shows that growth is slow and can be managed, partly because it may lead to that much lusted for interest rate cut by the Federal Reserve.
Now let's throw in one more bit of weirdness. The rally later this week was led by real estate stocks, which was the worst performing sector in all of the markets so far this year. What does that mean? I mean, interest rates only fell like 1/100% the last few days. So, I mean, it's still above 7. Why real estate stocks?
It's hard to say. And really asking a Silicon Valley reporter to talk about real estate as a country is really not right. Our real estate market is in this really weird, hyper hot bubble. And, I think what real estate stocks, which obviously trade throughout the country, want to see is, a little more action, more inventory, more buying and selling, and therefore more construction of housing. And I think a drop in a drop in interest rates will goose the real estate market. And so that's probably what they're hoping for. But again, I say that as someone who is just dealing with these astronomical prices and a drastic shortage of housing out here on the West Coast.
I'm just focused on paying the mortgage each month.
Right.
Real quickly, I think it was Motor Trend just had an article about the EV market, the 4 big companies, Fisker, Lucid, Rivian, and Tesla. Not a lot of good news. I mean, Fisker looks like it's going out of business. It's on the brink of bankruptcy, according to one of its suppliers. Lucid actually had good revenues, but they're bleeding enormous amounts of money, and it's hard to see how they can keep funding what they're trying to do. Rivian is slumping too, which is interesting because I see a lot of Rivians driving around. People like them. But they seem to be a little bit troubled too. And Tesla, of course, has laid off people. What's going on? Is this what you thought would be what you thought it is? It's a shakeout that we always have with new technology. We have a whole bunch of players jump into the market, and then we have the big shakeout, and just a couple survive. Is that what this is, or is this the population turning against pure EVs and shifting over to hybrids?
Maybe a bit of both, but I like what you said first, that it feels like that sort of shakeout when we get new hot technology. Everything is hot, the stock prices all soar, and then you're right, one of two things happen, either consolidation or a shakeout. And I think we're seeing the shakeout here. You mentioned Lucid. Lucid makes these really beautiful cars with a huge range. People spend a lot of money, but only on a few of them. You don't see them all that much. I was staggered at their recent earning report that said they lose more than $300,000 for every car they sell. That's a crazy business model that will run out of space.
Like $1 billion a year or something. It's just amazing.
Yeah, so they will run out of cash unless and until they can fix that problem. Rivian is right now the kid everybody likes. Their cars are popular. People love them. Every Rivian owner that I talk to loves them, and I'm that annoying person that comes up to an EV owner and talks to them about it. They've got a couple models waiting in the wings that EV owners like myself are looking at and saying, whoa, I'd love to own one of those in 2 or 3 years. But their stock price is way down because they too lose money for every car they sell. And that's just a crazy business model that the more successful you are, the more money you lose. That was sort of a 1999 thing, and we are sort of seeing that again. The one interesting bit of news is a rumor that, Apple is somehow interested in Rivian. And it's a rumor that almost makes sense, that one company that wants to get into cars would buy this popular, well-made, but way undervalued car company. I don't know if anything goes from there, but, Tesla is still somewhere between $500 and $600 billion. So, a bit of the bloom is off the rose, but it's still a super high-powered company.
Yeah, the rumors about the Apple Rivian deal are interesting because my first thought was the Rivian truck kind of looks like it could be an Apple product. The focus on design and simplicity and all of that. It might not be a bad fit.
Yeah, I mean, Apple wants to get into perhaps a new gadget. And what are cars these days, especially EVs, but rolling gadgets? They're like smartphones with wheels.
Gadgets, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Intel had its numbers. It came out and, it came at pretty good numbers, but the Commerce Department announced that it was revoking some licenses on exports to Chinese companies, and telecom companies especially, Huawei being one of them. And that's a big customer for Intel. So Intel kind of suggested that it's going to be a rough quarter or two until they manage to figure out how to get around this mess.
I think this is part of a larger story, and it's the China versus American story that we're going to see, I think, played out over the next couple of years. And it's not getting the headlines that TikTok is getting, but really, China will not let American social media companies operate in China. Yeah. And now America has this bill that it passed to get rid of TikTok unless TikTok, spins off its own American version. And so this sort of Cold War between the two business-wise, and I'm not surprised that it's hitting chips because, if there's anything hotter than social media right now, it's chips and their, foundation for AI, which also China and America are going head-to-head on. So I imagine we'll see more of these battles over things like chips and social media and maybe even search. And it'll be interesting to see where the Apples and the Teslas fall out because both of those companies are trying to sell product in China. But I think we've got this back and forth battle over tech right now.
Well, and we know the Chinese government is really trying to keep people from buying Teslas over there, especially government workers. And we know, not to make a pun, but the China has pushed all of its chips forward on the table in support of Huawei against Apple. And, this could get real nasty real soon. And the Commerce Department, interestingly, is reacting to this. They're not saying it, but they're quietly making the point that we don't want to do business with China anymore.
Right. I agree. And I think that's going to be the way this whole TikTok thing plays out, where it's our company that makes chips versus your company that makes chips. China seems to be saying, we've got our social media, you've got your social media. we're willing to come into your place of business. And America is saying, nope, we're not going to allow that. So maybe it becomes us versus them for both chips and software and social.
Okay, next. FTX, our old friend Sam Bankman-Fried. Well, they just announced that they're going to pay everybody back who lost money. I think they have they've got 14.5 billion up to 16 billion to pay off the $11 billion of debt. And interestingly, those whose claims are less than 50 grand are going to get about 120% of their money back. They're actually going to make money by being ripped off. Kind of interesting. How much money did Bankman-Fried have stashed that he can pay back everybody who lost money on that con game?
That's a great question. And I wonder if it's just simply the price of Bitcoin, which has gone up since the arrest. I mean, remember, after his arrest and the shutdown of FTX, Bitcoin really tanked because it was thought, well, all this stuff is just going to go away. But I guess they got all that crypto back, right? And so it turns out it's worth more. So people weren't really, I mean, I guess they were sort of keeping it in the exchange, right? Even though the exchange was found to be illegal and went away, people get their money back. And that's the best, not for Sam Bankman-Fried, but for the investors or the stakeholders, whatever. It is the best possible scenario that while all this was going on, their holdings went up in value, and so they get paid back with interest.
And so they can't even sue for even what they lost by having their money make money, because at FTX, their money made money while it was out of their hands.
They don't have to sue. They save all the legal fees, and they get to get paid back, just in a slightly different way than most of the time you put money into an account and then pull it back out.
Yeah. Okay. Next, I got this from Bob Grove, our East Coast correspondent. He found a story that said workers are secretly using AI on important tasks for fear that if they were caught, it would make them replaceable. So they're hiding the fact that they're using AI to do their work. Interestingly, a study by Microsoft and LinkedIn, which came out Wednesday, they surveyed 31,000 people across 31 countries and found that 75% of workers are using AI in the workplace, and over half of the respondents don't want to admit that they're using it. And this is because 53% of those who are using AI at work are worried that it makes them look replaceable. I think we're beginning to see the big shift now. So everybody's secretly using AI, but they present it to the boss as, man, I've worked 200 hours on getting this report together, and I hope you like it, boss. And then now I heard from my youngest son that there's a new algorithm out that will help detect if something was created by AI. So that's what the bosses, we're in this arms race now with, white collar workers caught in between. They're lying and the boss is trying to figure out if they're lying.
Right. So be wary if someone says, boy, I'll tell you, I'm like a machine in here. I'm really working that hard.
You just show up and read comic books with your office light on late at night so they see you as they're driving by on the freeway.
I was going to say after your car drives you to work. So really, there's not much for you to do anymore.
Okay. Chip, this is interesting. As long as we're on AI and chips, ARM Holdings came out with their numbers and they hit their estimates, but they also came out with a yearly estimate forecast, and they're saying that the uncertainty around the pace of the build out of artificial intelligence computing may slow their growth, which is, I mean, are we finally reaching at the early saturation of AI and now we have to wait until the next, bubble starts forming in that world?
It's hard to say. And I think it's fair to say it's hard to say because that's what these companies are doing. Yeah. A lot of these earning reports, not just ARM and not even just the chip guys, but a lot of companies are saying, hey, it was a really good quarter. But the future looks a little cloudy. And that sort of makes sense because we have all these models and companies like OpenAI saying we're going to get better and what you're doing now is only a beginning. But nobody's really figured out what's coming next. And so these companies are admitting the future is a bit cloudy. That's not what investors want to hear, especially after they've tripled and quadrupled your stock over the last year.
Yeah, but
And so,
you can't maintain hysteria forever.
right, right. And so I think you're seeing some caution and some, therefore, we just, companies admitting they don't know what's coming up. And that's making investors take a pause and pull back, which makes sense. This thing is getting ahead of itself, as tech trends often do.
Yeah. Okay. Elon Musk's brain chip company, Neuralink, just announced that its first chip, the one that was embedded in a gentleman, what's his name? Nolan Arbaugh, 29 years old, quadriplegic. It's failed. And so they're going back to the drawing board. One thing I do admire about Elon Musk is he won't quit. He treats everything like SpaceX and the Neuralink as alpha and beta, as not finished products, and he's going to keep trying to perfect it as it goes along. That's half my mind. The other half of my mind remembers Barney Clark. Remember that he was the first man to get an artificial heart, and it was such a nightmare. He begged to die, and his story has always haunted me as being the guinea pig for a new technology. And I hope that there wasn't any long-term damage by this failure of Neuralink. I think Neuralink has a huge future and a benefit for mankind, but this development process is scary.
Yeah, I think actually, I don't know that it failed completely. I think some of the connectors had unconnected or something, but it didn't cost him anything, the patient. That said, right, I this whole thing is a little strange that they're testing it on patients, and that's always a dicey thing. And again, the concern with Musk is that he has so many things going at the same time. Is he really focusing enough on any one of these things? And we'll see going forward. But I think Neuralink, for all its promise, still has a lot of work to do and to go before it becomes something that people are ready to invest in, either with their own lives and whatever, but also their money.
Okay, let's go real quick. ChatGPT has announced that it's considering allowing pornography to be created on its visual site. Here we go again. I mean, it's been part of the story of every consumer product in my lifetime. So I guess it's to be expected. Another matter is sriracha. It's going to be a mild, boring summer because sriracha just announced it's not going to be doing any production till Labor Day because they can't get the right kind of peppers, the right colors. So,
you mean the condiment sriracha?
Yeah,
okay.
I just threw that in because it's just an interesting story about about what it's going to be like. I guess you're going to have rather mild tacos until fall. And finally, now we're back to technology. Last night you did a story on Apple's new TV commercial for iPad, and I saw it today. For people who haven't seen it, it shows a giant crushing machine, and in the middle of that machine, it's being crushed, are a piano, artist paints, a guitar, and it slowly crushes it down and turns it all to goo. And I just sat there with my jaw hanging down. Like, they're trying to do the 1984 commercial again. They're trying to stun us. But the message they're giving, the allegory of all this is 7,000 years of human civilization and creativity crushed to make the iPad, to make the new iPad. And I thought, what did they miss? Oh, they have a Martin guitar, but they need a Stradivarius. And how about Moses's tablets and Gilgamesh and Shakespeare's First Folio? Maybe we can crush that too and turn it into goo. What were they thinking?
I don't know. I think the original idea of having all those things and saying you can get it in one super tiny thing was an interesting idea. But instead of, say, funneling it all in,
Yeah,
or
miniaturize it onto the iPad.
right, the idea of crushing it. And it was hard to watch. And it's funny, I talked to marketing people, I talked to musicians, I talked to artists, and they said the visceral feeling they had while watching either expensive camera lenses or a piano or that guitar you talked about. I think I saw the Pixar lamp being crushed. It was just strange that all that stuff was being demolished by a company that not all that long ago was really pumping out music to the masses so that we could all discover art and culture.
Yeah, and who is Apple's largest market for its high-end devices? Creatives. And what did you do to the company's image among creatives to do a commercial like that? It looks like a demo reel by an advertising agency being really, really clever, and nobody dialed it back. Nobody sat in that meeting room in the Death Star and said, wait a minute, this is wrong. We shouldn't be destroying this stuff. The idea is we're empowering people to be creative.
I agree. And I'm stunned that it actually got greenlit. Not that it got made, because there's something to be said for, oh, let's take all this stuff and put it into an iPad. How do we illustrate that? Here's one way. But someone in that room had to say, this is a really bad way. This is a bad idea. Apple is doing the opposite of what it's known for. And what was interesting, Mike, is that about halfway through the day on, when was this, Wednesday, people started, I imagine with Apple editing software, ironically, reverse engineering the ad. So it's pulling apart these jaws that were crushing things. And so you saw the emergence of the piano and art supplies and guitar and all of that coming out of the iPad. They
Well, that's
even
brilliant.
changed.
That's
Yeah, they
brilliant.
even
If
changed
you
the
ran the
song.
commercial in reverse, they
Yes.
would have had a winner.
Well, you could say that, yeah. And although at some point you would have had to come to grips with the fact that they crushed it all first, but at least the reversals showed, oh, from the iPad, all of these creative and musical tools, and instead of just crushing it all and saying all of this humanity, all of these individual things crushed to be one thin, powerful machine. And isn't really that what we're up against, right now with all this stuff?
Exactly. Did you say that at Apple came out with an apology today?
Yeah. So
They never do
I
that.
can tell you that
Nobody
many
in
people,
tech does that.
I know, and especially Apple. And I was one of, I'm sure, many media organizations that reached out yesterday and this morning for comment. Like, so what do you say about all? I mean, the backlash was gigantic. It was the only thing on my feed. It was gigantic. It was like the opening night of the Taylor Swift Eras tour for technology. Everybody was talking about it. And Apple got back to Ad Age, which is a super well-known advertising organization, and did do an apology and said we got a bit over our skis. Yeah, they said, we misfired and we apologize. I guess they're not going to run it on television. And so that also is a surprise that Apple would be willing to, within 24 hours, dial this back. I checked just a bit ago. It's still on Tim Cook's Twitter page, the actual ad. But it was an interesting day because the ad was probably seen 100 million times on Twitter alone. Now that's publicity. But on the other hand, the backlash was such that Apple felt the need to get out there and tell Ad Age, a super well-respected advertising organization, hey, we misfired here.
So it goes into that hall of one-time only Apple ads, the original Macintosh 1984 ad, and then the Lemmings ad, the people going off the cliff, and now we have the the Civilization Crusher ad.
Right. I mean, depending on your age, you may have to be our age to say, oh, I remember the 1984 ad. People are like, whoa, that was a long time ago. And someday they'll say, oh, I was on Twitter for the or X or whatever they'll call it for the iPad ad. And people say,
no. And what's interesting is those first two ads, they can make them disappear. It's very hard to find the Lemmings ad, but this had 100 million hits already. It's sitting out there till the end of time.
And it's also the reverse engineer one too is out there somewhere and will be. Yeah.
Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. You can see Scott on Facebook and X, and of course, almost every weeknight on NBC Bay Area, and me regularly on the BBC World Radio show Business Matters. And I will fix this microphone after we get off. And have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye bye.